conference. To give a very brief introduction about our speaker, we have with us CA Vishalji Poddar to present on the topic. To briefly introduce, is a partner with SS Mutha and Company in the tax and assurance practice with special focus on indirect taxes since 2003. He is a postgraduate in commerce from Pune University and member of ICAI. He has been empaneled as a GST trainer by ICAI for undertaking GST related trainings. He is also a regular speaker with industry forums on budget, regulatory, GST related issues. He has served as member of Indirect Tax Committee of WASC of ICAI. For this very brief introduction, I wholeheartedly welcome you, sir, for today's program. Thank you.
Start. Good morning, one and all. I hope you all are fully charged up for this session, especially because it's more closely associated to your day-to-day practice. I'm sure by the end of this session, I should be able to add a lot of value to your day-to-day practice. Most importantly, I have also been attending many sessions since I'm more into academics and litigation. I've seen that many times there are two types of views that we get. One is a very litigative view, and the other one, the view which is more applicable to our day-to-day practice. Now, since I'm addressing to the gathering of chartered accountants who are, I presume, basically more into practice, so I would try to give you such an approach to various issues which should also help you practically and not unnecessarily drag you into unnecessary litigations. Yes, where we stand a good chance, we should litigate, but that again comes with a cost, and it also comes with a lot of time investment for us as professionals and also for the concerned assessee. So it should always be a proper call from our side whether we want to get into litigation or not. I'm sorry, there is some problem with the configuration, so the slides are coming without images, but I'm fine. Only the decorative part is missing, but I'm sure the topic itself is having so much content that the images, even if missing, will not create much a difference. I firstly thank the Bangalore branch and thank my alma mater ICAI for giving me this opportunity. I thank the chairman of the branch and all the committee members to put in place such a great national conference. With these few words, let us start with the presentation for the day. The topic assigned to me is input tax credit, specifically addressing the critical practical issues. Before I start with the topic as such, I always, whenever I used to study, and today also whenever I study any new thing, I try to relate it with something which I understand or which I always follow. One such concept from our Indian tradition is the concept of Tridev. Now, we all are well versed with this concept, and interestingly, if I say that even the Western philosophy has copied this concept, then I'm sure nobody should be shocked, because in Western philosophy, the Almighty is referred by the term God. And God, according to me, is nothing but the abbreviation of our Trideva philosophy. How? G stands for generator, that is Brahma. O stands for organizer, that is Vishnu. And D is destroyer, that is Shiva. So I'm sure that God is not an abbreviation, is not a separate terminology, but an abbreviation for our Indian philosophy of Tridev. Now, how this philosophy is applicable to taxation? In taxation also we have Trideva. The role of Brahma is played by the parliament, who is the lawmaker. Here we can say it is also the GST Council for GST. then the role of Vishnu is played by us, the consultants, and from the government side, the departmental officials, whose role is ensuring proper implementation of the law. And then finally comes the role of Shiva, which is very crucial in GST, because since GST is still in very infant stage, we are going to come up with many cases, many litigations where many pronouncements would define what would be eventually the GST law. So the role of Shiva is played by the judiciary. Now we come to our topic, but before I come to the issues directly, I would like to create a platform so that when we discuss the issues, it will help you understand and also help you appreciate the positions that we are going to discuss for the various issues. Now, the first thing that I would like to discuss with you is whether input tax credit is your legal right or it is only a concession. Because once we get answer to this, we would be able to answer many issues and also answer many show cause notices which are directly challenging our right to get ITC. In this respect, the first thing which I would like to present in front of you is the statement of objects and reasons. One, which had come with the 122nd Constitution Amendment Bill, which brought the provisions for GST in place, and also the CGST Bill. For both these bills, the statement of objects and reasons, which are copy-paste, have promised that GST law, which is newly being introduced, is introduced with the intention of allowing seamless transfer of input tax credit. Dear members, please mark this point that this particular part of the objects and reasons would be definitely taken up whenever the matter will go to High Court or Supreme Court about whether or not you should be allowed input tax credit. Also, in this relation, I would like to add one more point. Nowadays, we are handling one very major issue about circular trading. If you would have heard about this issue, it is between A, B, C, D, and again A. Now, in such cases, what we are seeing that, no doubt, it is a wrongdoing by the assessee. But the opinion, the stand taken by the department is that they will be recovering input tax credit from A, B, C, D, E, all the parts. This I personally understand is not correct, because if there is a wrongdoing in the form of circular trading, it is the one same transaction which has moved from everybody's books, and you should collect tax, interest, penalty, definitely, but that collection of tax and penalty should be only by one person, the main culprit, and not by each and every person. Here also, these statements of objects and reasons can come to help. Next part. In understanding whether it is a right or a concession, since we are talking about a constitutional right, that whether ITC is your constitutional right, we should understand what are the constitutional provisions in relation to this. We had an article 19(1)(f), which was deleted with effect from 20th of June 1979, and in that place another article 300A was introduced, which is still there in the constitution. Now, the earlier article 19(1)(f) provided you unconditional right in respect of your property. However, it was deleted, and now the new article says that you have right, but that right is subject to provisions of law, subject to authority of law. So from this also we get our first answer relating to whether input tax credit can be said to be your constitutional right. Answer is it will become, or it will get the color of constitutional right only when you comply with all the requirements of law. So only when it is provided by the law, then only it can become your constitutional right. First point to be marked after the objects and reasons. Now coming to some judicial pronouncements. We'll first start with some legacy decisions, and then I will come to some current decisions from which we will get to know what is the real intent of the court regarding this particular aspect. The most important case law in this relation is of Eicher Motors, where it was very categorically stated by the Honorable Supreme Court that you are eligible to get input tax credit immediately once the goods are received in your factory, but only on the basis of existing scheme. This underlined part is very important. Means what? Though you are entitled to the credit, but only when you follow the scheme which is provided by the law. But further it is saying, once you comply with all the conditions provided in the scheme, means the law, then it becomes an indefeasible right, means then it will become your constitutional right or authority. So what is the most important part that we get from this particular decision is that prima facie it is not a constitutional right, but once you comply with the requirement of the law, which gives you that particular input tax rate, it will get the color of the right. Now, this case law you can use in many aspects. So I'm listing down those areas where you can use this case law if you have to answer notices. One, we all know that in textile sector earlier, refund was not allowed for inverted duty structure. It started getting allowed from August 2018, but it came with a notification that whatever is your earlier credit, that would lapse. I'm sure this particular decision will help in fighting out the lapse matter, because you availed the credit correctly, so a notification cannot lapse a credit later on which was availed. You can use the Eicher Motors case. In fact, it was already applied by the Honorable Gujarat High Court in Shabnam case, and it has a positive decision. The matter is pending with the Honorable Supreme Court. Next, very important matter. I'm sure your clients would have been facing this issue of blocking of input tax credit as per Rule 86A. You can use Eicher Motor case for there. I'm coming to 86A separately, but this case law is helpful even in that particular matter. Third, it has happened specifically in the earlier period of GST that you received correct invoice. The invoice showed, let us say, IGST, but while punching in the 3B, you wrongly punched in as CGST, SGST, or vice versa. Now, when the mistake is identified, either during audit or by the officer says, fine, you have taken wrong credit of IGST, you reverse it, no problem. But he says, now I will not give you the credit of CGST, SGST because the time has lapsed. Here, let me tell you one thing. You complied with all the conditions, but only the punching error was that instead of putting in the CGST, SGST column, a clerical mistake happened and you typed it in the IGST column. But you complied with all the conditions initially. Hence, simply because it goes in the wrong bucket, it will not change the character and you are still eligible for that ITC despite of lapsing of the due date. So again, here you can quote the Eicher Motors case, and also we are going to discuss this matter whether the time limit itself is legally tenable. Over there also Eicher Motor case will be helpful. We are going to discuss this separately. And if you all know, whenever you register and you are converting from composition to regular, or you are converting from exempt to taxable, the law allows you to take credit of the ITC lying on stock. But the problem is it puts a limitation of 1 year. Now we can also challenge that 1 year limitation, because if I have complied with all the conditions originally, later on when I'm getting converted from composition to regular, I should be allowed ITC even of the earlier inputs purchased prior to 1 year. Here also I can use this case. Second decision is in Godrej and Boys. Here also, and another decision in Daiichi Kankaria. In all these decisions, see, there are different aspects covered in this. Like in Daiichi Kankaria, one more aspect was covered, that whether one-to-one correlation is required or not. But I'm not highlighting that aspect. Here, what we are trying to highlight is only one point, that whether input tax credit is your legal right. The answer is, again, if you see the decisions in all these cases, further, the case of JM Company, and also the case of State of Karnataka versus MK Agro, in all these cases, one thing, a common thread that you find flowing is that everywhere the law says that once you comply with the conditions, originally something which is a concession, originally something which is a benefit, will now take color of a right. So all these cases, they are already part of the printed notes. You can please use them. That is why I'm not only deliberating, I have already given it in printed form so that you can use them. The citations are there. Please use them in answering the show cause notices if you are receiving on the matter. Now coming to some current judicial rulings. These were all legacy cases of excise and VAT era. Now what are the current judicial rulings in this respect? The first is of VKC Footstep. In this particular case, the Honorable Supreme Court has denied refund. The refund is denied for input tax credit on input services. It only allows refund of inputs. I'm sure if this matter escalates and it is further taken in review, if it is correctly fought out, this should come in our favor, but presently it is going against us. Next is of RSPL Limited. Here also the law says that law is very correct in denying transitional credit in respect of capital goods if the relevant conditions are not satisfied. And again in Mohit Minerals case, where the law denied input tax credit and set off of the clean energy cess which you paid in the earlier period, because now post implementation of GST, we don't have this cess. Now, in all these cases also, one common thing we find, the intent of the courts are same. What was there in the earlier case, that if you comply with all the conditions, then only this thing, which is a concession, will take the color of right. So to conclude, first point, there is no specific provision either in the constitution or the GST laws that gives ITC the color of vested right. Even section 155 of the CGST Act imposes the burden on you, that is the recipient, to prove that he is eligible to get the ITC. So this is also not going in our favor. But the final conclusion that we can draw from all these three things that I posted in front of you, one is the object and reasons, the second is the constitutional provision, and the third is the past and the current rulings. One thing we can conclude is that it is not your fundamental right per se, but once all the underlying conditions are satisfied, it would become your fundamental and constitutional right. Now, so what are these conditions that you need to satisfy to make it your right? Now we will go column wise. Okay, I think you'll be able to understand even without the pointer. So first column says the recipient is required to be registered. He should possess the tax invoice and the relevant documents. The transaction should be reflected in his portal. Now this is yet to be notified. I'm sure everybody knows section 16(2)AA was introduced by the Finance Act 2021, but this portion of Finance Act is not yet notified. So this is something which is of great advantage to us in answering many show cause notices, because it should reflect in your portal is not yet notified. So it is not yet part of the law. Next, you should have received the goods services. Further, you can claim ITC before due date only. We are going to discuss this at length. You should have filed your returns, and you should have made the payment within 180 days. Now, these are some of the conditions which the recipient should satisfy. From the vendor side, the condition is the vendor should have paid tax. Now, these are the basic conditions which entitles you to be getting the ITC, or which entitles or which converts the ITC into constitutional right. But how much these conditions are valid, we are going to see in the coming slides. Further, you have to also check the blocking section 17(5), that your credit should not be blocked over there. And also, wherever applicable, you have to take only proportionate credit if you are engaged in both taxable and exempt supplies. Now, these are the conditions. Now, with all these things at our background, let us start with the critical issues with respect to ITC. I have tried to focus on those issues. At the start, we are going to take those issues on which already you all would be facing show cause notices, summons, and towards the end, I have taken those cases which may not have come up as on the date, but I'm sure in future you will also be facing those cases. Let us get started. So let us start with some legal issues relating to ITC. First is, the first basic point of dispute today is the law requires under section 16(2)(c) that the tax is paid by the supplier, only then you are eligible to get the ITC. And for this, we are having so many cases where ultimately it is discovered that the supplier did not pay tax, the supplier flees, and you are called upon as the recipient to reverse your ITC. Now, how can you handle this matter? So this is the verbatim of the section which says that you will be eligible to ITC provided your supplier has paid the tax. Now, interesting part, if you can see here, it requires that the supplier should have paid tax either in cash, that is utilizing the cash ledger, or through utilization of his ITC. And the most interesting part is in respect of the said supply. Now here, the words used are through utilization of input tax credit admissible. Now this is on the side of supplier. So the law says you will get ITC if your supplier has paid tax either utilizing cash or utilizing his admissible ITC. Now you receive notice because your supplier has not done that. How can you handle the notice? Maybe you'll have to make notings of certain points, because later on I added something which was not shared in your notes. So just open the respective page, and whatever you find additional in my slide, not there in the printed notes, you can please make a note of that. The first most important thing is, see, whenever the matter will go to High Court, the matter would also highlight one important thing, that is what was the intent of the law. And while understanding the intent of the law, different legal maxims which are used, one of them which can be applied over here is lex non cogit impossibilia, which means that no law can make you do something which is impossible. And if a law makes you do something which is impossible, the law itself will be null and void. Now here, I will take this stand when I'm fighting the case for this particular matter that my supplier has not paid tax. So why should I reverse my ITC? My first stand would be that it is impossible for me to ensure that he has paid tax. Why? First, I have no control on his payment. Many times it happens, you would have faced this, that you call up the supplier, he says, sir, maine bhar diya hai. Sir, I have done that. And you have no authority to check. You cannot go and check his books. Second problem, why it is impossible? Because even if he's saying that he has made payment, even if it is reflecting in 2A, how can you be so sure that it is paid? Second challenge. And the third most important part, the language used here is, the law says that he should have utilized his input tax rate, which is admissible. Now, this is even going a step forward. How can you go and check whether he has taken legitimate ITC and utilize that ITC which is admissible to him? I cannot do that. How can I find out that whatever ITC he is utilizing while making payment of this tax is admissible, is legitimate? I have no control. I have no possibility of doing this. This is my first contention in handling these issues. For this, we have past precedents. One of the case laws of income tax has been posted over here. You can use that. Second thing which you can use in answering the notice is, in the 20th GST Council meeting, it was clearly mentioned in para 8.3 that there would be no automatic reversal of input tax credit at the recipient's end where tax has not been paid by the supplier. Again, this is part of the GST Council's minutes. The minutes itself have said that you are not required to reverse if the supplier is not paying. So the second thing to your defense. Third thing, what you can use to your defense is some present recent decisions. What are they? The first decision is of the Honorable High Court, Delhi High Court in Arise India Limited case, which is also followed by the Honorable Rajasthan High Court and Uttarakhand High Court in their respective cases. Also to inform you, this matter was later on escalated by the department in Supreme Court, but the SLP was dismissed by the Supreme Court. So in short, this decision holds. What does the decision says? Purchasing dealer cannot be asked to do the impossible. Now this is under the VAT regime, but we can equally apply it under GST law because the provisions of Delhi VAT are very much similar to what we are seeing in our ITC. So first is, what does this decision says? Purchasing dealer cannot be asked to do impossible. So they are applying the same maxim which we discussed in the previous slide. Second, this case says you have to first initiate recovery from the seller. And most important, only when it is proved that there was a collusion between the buyer and seller and together they have done something fraudulent, then only you should ask the recipient or the buyer to reverse. Otherwise, see, you are the officer, you have data of each and every person, and if the supplier is registered, you have more control over the supplier rather than the recipient. How can recipient go and ensure or collect tax from supplier, but you have all the machinery to go and collect tax from the supplier? Then why are you coming to me first? Why are you asking me to reverse? You have the powers, you have law by your side, you have machinery by your side. You should go and collect the tax first from the supplier. This is what this particular case is very specifically pointing out. Also, it says that it is violative of Article 14. That is fine. Next important judgment, similarly relating to VAT, is of DY Bethel Enterprises. In similar scenarios, it says that ITC cannot be straight away recovered from the recipient on failure of paying of tax by the supplier. But for this, what does it say? Without allowing the recipient to examine the supplier as a witness and without initiating recovery action against the supplier. So somewhere this case also asks that you should first initiate action against the supplier, and if that is not possible, then only you can come to the recipient. Here, one most important advice I would like to add, that whenever the matter comes to you as a recipient, they're asking you to reverse, you should always request the officer, sir, I want to cross-examine the supplier. I'll tell you, this is what happened in this case. And in 90% of cases where we are doing this, we have found that you are never given this opportunity of cross-examining the supplier. And once this is the case, even though the order is passed against you, immediately where you go in the higher appeal, the matter is in your favor because you are not allowed the opportunity of cross-examining the supplier. So you should ask for this opportunity whenever this matter is taken up. Further, now the next important issue, the second issue relating to ITC that all of us are troubled with is application of Rule 36.4. Now, Rule 36.4 was introduced by way of a notification, and it got inserted from this date. Now this date is very important. It got inserted from 9th of October 2019 and it is by way of a notification. It is inserted in rules. I'm not reading what it says. Originally you are allowed 20% over and above what is reflecting in your 2A. Then it came to 10%. Now it is 5%. Now there is a new question. Wherever I take session on ITC, people say, sir, wo 2A ka 5% lena hai ya 2B ka lena hai. Now, this is another question that we are facing, that whether it has to be 5% above 2A or 5% above 2B. Let us find the answers. There is also a circular. Now this circular will be of help to you because I have classified this 36(4) related cases into 3 categories. What are they? The issues can be segregated periodically. First, issue pertaining to period prior to issue of this notification. Now, if you are getting notice that you have taken excess credit and this notice is pertaining to any tax period before 9th of October 2019, then you can very well answer the notice saying that, sir, your notice itself is defunct, because what you are asking me to do was not there even in the rules before 9th October 2019, and there is a circular clarifying this, that they cannot ask you to reverse ITC for a period prior to this. So you can use this circular also, because normally I have seen officers, they don't like discussing law, but they are okay if you give them some reference of circular, because circulars are something which come from their own authority. Next, if the matter is between 9th of October till date. Now I am saying till date because there is a new section as we discussed 16(2)AA, but it is yet to be notified. So till date 16(2)AA is notified. What should be your stance is what we are going to discuss in the next slide. So prior to 9th October, it is in your favor. From 9th October till this 16(2)A gets notified, we are going to discuss. Yes, post this date 16(2)A, it will become challenge. It means we may have to comply with the 36(4) rule if it stays post 16(2)AA. Now, what to do if the notice pertains to tax period between 9th of October 2019 till date? The answer is how to reply these notices. First, your first contention should be, sir, 36(4) is a rule and it is having no legal backing, and it is a set principle of law that rules, notifications cannot supersede the law. First contention. Second, in 39 GST Council meeting, where 16(2)AA was proposed to be introduced and later on it was introduced by way of Finance Act 2021, the minutes of this council meeting says that what was the need of bringing in 16(2)AA? To remove the above issue that there was no legal backing. So somewhere they are accepting that there is no legal backing, and that is why they wanted 16(2)AA, and now to your benefit 16(2)AA is not introduced. So somewhere by linking this point with the council meeting, you can always say that, sir, your council minutes have said that why they want to introduce 16(2)AA, because 36(4) has no legal backing. Until date 16(2)AA is not yet notified. It means your own council is accepting that 36(4) has no legal backing. Next, in order to give it some backing, they had introduced 43A, which said that there could be some restriction on quantum of ITC. Now the best part is 43A is again not yet notified. So there was earlier a section to give backing to 36(4) in the form of section 43A, but that is also not in existence, means it is not yet notified. So that is what is our first stand. So the first point is that there is no legal backing for this. The next 3 points would be of use. Next important. The second stance would be, now this is again a litigated point, whether 3B is a return. Now I'm sure you would be knowing this, that the Honorable Gujarat High Court had given a favorable decision that 3B is not a return. But later on, government brought a retrospective amendment making it a return. Now that matter is still pending with Honorable Supreme Court. So if we get a favorable decision from there, then that would be a relief. But till then, even if for the time being, I agree that 3B is a return, which I personally believe it is not, it is only a challan. But if they say that 3B is a return, it is again helping me, because now they are saying 3B is going to replace 3. And when you introduce 3, originally, it was supposed to have the linking of 1, 2A, 2, 3, and that is how 3 was supposed to operate. Now, if you are saying 3B is replacing 3, it means you are also replacing all the matching principle, because 3B has no matching. So indirectly, by accepting that 3B is a return, the lawmakers have somewhere accepted that matching cannot be in place because 3B is not having matching. I hope you got this point. This is slightly technical, but this point is that you can always take a contention that, sir, you are saying 3B is a return. Chalo, for the time being, I accept. But this is in my favor in this 2A, 2B mismatch cases, because if 3B is a return, again 2A, 2B mismatches cannot happen because 3B has no provision of mismatching, because all the sections which I have mentioned, 41, 42, 43 for mismatch, which were there, is not operative because of 3B. So if 3B is a return, anyways mismatch automatically becomes defunct. Next, as already mentioned, 2AA is yet to be notified. Next important point. By the Finance Act 2020-21, an explanation is added to section 75, which says that if the supplier has declared something in GSTR1 but not in 3B, now this is also a case many times that the supplier is declaring in 1 but not in 3B, it would be treated as self-assessed and the recovery would lie against the supplier. So this is also to your benefit. And a very recent Honorable Supreme Court decision in Union of India versus Bharti Airtel, where para 46 Supreme Court has clearly mentioned that 2A is only a facilitator for taking informed decisions. It cannot be a basis for allowing or disallowing. So these are some important pointers that you can use in defense when you are answering mismatch notices of 2A to B. So if you ask me, what is my view? My view is till date 2A to B has no relevance. But adding to this, see, again, as I mentioned at the start, since I'm addressing a gathering of practicing chartered accountants, my personal humble view would be that wherever possible, wherever you can do matching and wherever you can proceed without impacting the working capital of your client, please comply with the provisions so that unnecessary we don't get notices and unnecessary we don't get into all this. Because see, whatever I mentioned is going to help you, but I'm sure you would have handled this. It will never help you at the lower level. The adjudicating officer will never accept this. Maybe he may not even understand this. And even if it goes to the first stage of appeal, still it won't help. Tribunal is not in place, and going to High Court for writ may not be feasible for all clients considering the quantum involved. So my humble input would be, wherever possible, comply with 36.4. Now then somebody will say, chalo sir, I agree. We want to comply with 36.4. But we have another question. Matching with 2A or 2B? Again, if you ask me, even if we have to comply with 36.4, it has to be 2A. But the same point, if there is a difference between 2A and 2B, and obviously 2B is lesser, in order to avoid problems, if you are not interested in getting into litigation, if your client is not interested in getting notices, better is follow what the officer wants. See, this is not my personal view. This is just a conservative approach, because we may not have clients whose pocket size is so much that they can afford litigation or go for it. Better is we comply with the provisions, and comply in the sense what officer expects, not what the law says, because that is what is going to invite litigation. Fine. Also, you can use the erstwhile decisions in your support. Further, all these above contentions can help you wherever you have these problems in your returns. One, your supplier has reported B2B wrongly in B2C, so it is not appearing in 2A to B. Still, you can take this difference and you need not reverse ITC. Second, supplier has reported the tax in wrong head. He should have reported in IGST. See, there is a difference. He has charged correct tax on invoice. He has charged IGST, but when he was uploading his return, he has wrongly shown it in CGST, SGST. So in your 2A, it is reflecting, but it is reflecting in CGST, SGST of another state. So also you are not getting the credit. Here also you can use this as defense. Or third possibility is tax is paid in 3B. Many times the supplier says, sir, I have paid tax, but because of technical problems or because of lack of manpower, I am not able to upload GSTR1, or I have uploaded GSTR1, but there is some mistake. So in all these cases, what will happen? It is not reflecting in your 2A. And maybe now the supplier is not able to amend his GSTR1. So for defense, for all these situations where it is not appearing in your 2A, 2B, in these three cases, you can definitely use all the above stances and you can get out of this. Yes, sir.
Sorry if I'm asking a basic question. Now, my understanding of 2A and 2B is 2A is a dynamic record, 2B is a static record. So if I file a GSTR1 today, or let us say the month of September, in 2A it will be recorded in September. In 2B, that same transaction will be recorded in
December.
So why should there be any difference between 2A and 2B? Because a question of timing difference only is there. That's
Yeah.
one. Second, I had one, I did the GST audit. I found what happened in one of my clients is he tried to religiously follow this rule. And once, and afterwards forgot to claim the credit at all.
Sorry, sir. Can you repeat this last sentence?
He didn't want to claim the credit unless it came in 2A or 2B. Forgot to claim the credit. Afterwards, it became too late to claim the credit. So can we follow a principle of avail? That is, at least take it in the credit ledger, but be careful regarding utilize.
Okay, sir. I'll answer both questions. So, sir's first question, I hope if you have understood is, what is the difference between 2A and 2B? Why it is creating a difference, or why it is creating this question that whether I should follow 2A or 2B? Sir, answering you, I agree to this point that if I'm filing as a recipient, if I'm filing my current return, and if I see 2A, if I see 2B, it may appear same. But one difference, sir, 2B gets locked on midnight of 11th, which is the last date for filing GSTR1. 2A is still open. Now you are filing as a recipient your return on 20th. Your 3B you file by 20th, right? By 20th, if let us say the supplier has uploaded his GSTR1 late, even by 1 day, instead of 11th, he has uploaded on 12th. It will not appear in your 2B, but it is appearing in your 2A. First difference. Second reason why there is a difference between 2A and 2B is many times you as a recipient are filing your return late. So let us say now in your example, you as a recipient are filing your September return now. Now the question is, if you see the September 2A, because you are filing your September return, it is reflecting. But if you see September 2B, it is not reflecting. Third reason why this point comes, many times we try to do this towards the end, that is towards the time of 9 and 9C, we try to find out whether we have done everything right or not, because many times it is not possible monthly, or many times the monthly returns are taken care of by the client itself. They come to us only at the time of annual return. At such times, what is getting reflected, if you see 2A and 2B, you can understand there will be a big difference, because in past all months, 2B will be showing a different figure, but 2A may be now showing the correct figure because the supplier has uploaded his GSTR1 late. Are you getting, sir? So I hope I have answered your first question. So what is the difference and why there is an issue between 2A and 2B? It is this. Second question that sir is suggesting, then if I don't want to get into hassles also, if I don't want to get into problem also, I will do one thing. I will take the credit, even though it is not appearing in 2A or 2B, but it is there in my books. And whenever the supplier will file, he will file. But I will take the credit, only I will not utilize it, whether it will do. My personal view is now it will do, because earlier the challenge was interest. I hope you all know this. Earlier the challenge was interest because you are supposed to pay interest on gross. Also the challenge was if you availed credit, even if you are not utilizing, they were levying interest if the availment was wrong. Now I hope you all know that there is an amendment which says that if you have availed but not utilized, still there will be no interest. So now you can use the stand. But sir, again the problem is, sir, speaking from the dais is very easy. But when we sit in the office and when we go through all the records and we have to continuously do matching, it is very difficult. So over there, I think you'll have to use all these tools, for which I think you have the stalls outside. But yes, so the challenge is there. But second point, answering your question, you can very well now do that. You can avail that credit, even though it is not reflecting in 2A and 2B, but you have to ensure that it never gets utilized. But here I'll tell you what is the challenge. Let us say this credit is IGST, which is not reflecting in your 2A and 2B. IGST credit, right? Now the law says when you want to utilize, you have to first utilize IGST. Now you have C and S and you want to keep some amount of IGST aside because it is not appearing in your 2A or 2B, but the portal will not allow you. Then another challenge, what will you do? Are you getting my point? So these will be some practical challenges, but yes, you can very well do that, sir. Fine, sir? Okay. I hope this is clear. 2A, 2B? Yes, sir, please.
have an issue. Yeah, availing ITC. I have an issue going on right now in my office. There is a company, well known, I don't want to take its name,
No problem.
previous financial year. God knows for what reason, they have not given the two invoices at all. They have just electronically transmitted annually signed invoice. We
Oh.
religiously follow the rule. We have instructed our AP guy, if any invoice manually signed comes to us by way of email, don't consider it for booking itself. Because it will get reflected in purchase register and whole hell breaks loose. I'll consider it now, and while waiting for the invoice to come, if it passes beyond 180 days limit, I'll have to reverse it and reverse it with interest. Now, all of a sudden, the sales guy from that company, he has woken up, rather he has been made to wake up from his ER team. They have not got the payment for these two bills. Runs into laxes. What? IGST itself. Sorry, CGST is GST. We have taken a stand. We'll book the bill only to the extent of goods we'll pay you.
Not the GST.
Yeah,
This is what,
GST
sir,
con case.
practically everybody is now following. They have started following this.
Yeah,
Correct,
yeah.
sir.
So it's their right to protest. We are giving them their right. Okay, and we gave them long rope also. They didn't adhere to it. Our stand is right, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Sir, I'll add one thing.
Yeah.
So what we are doing in our client's case, because of similar problems. Now, when we enter into transaction, like, see, we have some printed conditions on our invoices, right? Similarly, when we are even buying dealer, I have asked them to make a sort of declaration or something on their letterhead and asked to give it to all their suppliers, saying that if your amount is not reflecting, then we will not pay you the GST portion. It will be paid only if it gets reflected within time. So this will add up to you, because tomorrow, let us say the person takes you to litigation. Then you should not be in the civil court. There should not be a problem that you have not made payment to him in time. So you can always add up this to your procedure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is fine, sir.
That side he has taken care well.
Yes.
By declaring it in returns and all. God knows for the reason for inordinate delay. They just didn't understand the concept of GST, I presume. It says signature or digitally sign. That's a rule, isn't it? They have not followed that rule properly. And
Sir.
they just kept transmitting by email, in spite of our repeated requests.
It may
And
be
now,
negligence also, sir.
Yeah, and now the electronically e-signed invoice, all of a sudden it drops.
Yes, yes.
So we told, our
Correct.
stand is right.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Third major issue, Rule 86A, blocking of ITC. Now again, the rule is this, that the assistant commissioner or any other authorized person would be having powers to block your input tax credit. Now, interestingly, the words are very important. Now, before I come to this, I was discussing this point 2 days back with another chartered accountant from Delhi, a very learned chartered accountant. And she pointed out one very interesting point to me. And then after discussing with her, I went back to all the laws and rules, and I really found that point very interesting. She said, Ki Vishal, in the other laws, including income tax or earlier laws, we had the concept of mens rea. Mens rea means guilty mind, and only then you could be penalized. I said, yes, ma'am, you are correct. She said, Vishal, go and see all the penal provisions of GST law. You will, interestingly, not find mens rea in many places. I said, Acha. And then I came to this rule when I was completing the PPT, and it just clicked. Yes, what she said was right. And then when I went to other sections also, interestingly, I found that to levy penalty in GST, mens rea is not required everywhere. Now, this is something very critical, because we many times, even me as a consultant or into litigation, is of the belief that I used to tell my client that, see, if you are not having wrong intentions, if you can prove that your intentions were right, but something went wrong, no problem, you'll have to pay tax and interest, but you will not be levied with penalty. But this is not the case in GST. And the best example is this 86A. Here, there is no penalty, but here they have rights to block your ITC. And I'm sure you will understand the gravity of this. If your ITC is blocked, then you continue business because you are still registered. They have not suspended or cancelled your registration. So whatever is your output liability, everything has to be paid in cash, which may be a very big problem. Now, this particular rule 86A says that the authorized person, whoever the person is, if he has reasons to believe, now I'm marking important points, reasons to believe. First part is that the crate of input available in the electronic ledger has been fraudulently availed. Now, till this point, you can say mens rea is there, because when we say fraud, it always comes with mens rea only. Without mens rea, there can be no fraud, there can be only mistake. Now, so first part requires mens rea, but the second part is very, according to me, very tragic for us. It says, or for reasons to be recorded in writing, not allowed debit. Sorry, I missed the line. Rate of input tax available in the electronic ledger has been fraudulently availed or is ineligible in as much as ... One first part it says it is fraudulently availed, or second part it simply says is ineligible, and then it has given 4 or 5 conditions that goods are not received, invoices not received, etc. Means somewhere what I'm trying to highlight is Rule 86A is so drafted that either when there is mens rea, no problem, they can block. I'm okay with this part, but only because there is some clerical mistake, something went wrong, which is written in 86A, those ABCD points, and there was no mens rea, still they have rights to block your ITC. This is something very tragic according to me. So we have to be very cautious with this particular rule. Now, 2 important things which I have underlined, which will help us to fight these cases is: 1, it says that you should have reasons to believe. Second, the reason should be recorded in writing. This is something which is for our defense, because if they block your ITC under 86A, how you can counter this particular matter? 1, first is, again, Rule 86A is having no backing by any section as such, and this is upheld by the Honorable Gujarat High Court in the case law which is given. So first is you will use this particular case law in answering the notice. Second most important point, I'll tell you what the officer will counter. Many times the common counter the officer has is, sir, how can you say we don't have the powers? We have the power. The power is given by section 164 of the CGST Act. This is what will be the counter of the officer. He will say, sir, section 164 gives powers to the government to make rules. But please understand, I'm not saying this to officer because I'm sure that is not possible, but I'm sorry, with due respect, I'm just informing you that please understand, even if there is power under section 164, power given to the government to make rules to implement the law, but the intent of section 164 power is just to help administering the law smoothly, not to do something like this, that only by making rule you can simply block the crate, because it can hamper the business very adversely. So you can answer or counter this saying, ki, sir, I agree that there is power under section 164, but the power is not omnipotent. It is not like God that you can do anything with that power. The power also comes with responsibility. Where is this said? Spider-Man movie. Every power comes with responsibility. You can quote this. Okay, fine. Next important thing, most important thing to your defense is, ask him for the reasons, because the rule itself requires that he should have reasons to believe, and the reasons should be recorded in writing. Many times we have seen that they have not recorded the reasons, or the reasons are not explainable. So if they have taken this action, first is quote the case law. Second, tell them, sir, you have recorded the reasons. I want the copy of the recorded reasons. Either they will not be having reasons, or they would have just stupidly put something one-liner. That is your biggest defense. With this, you can always go to the commissioner saying that the action taken is even against the rule, though the rule itself is invalid or not having legal backing. But still, if there are no reasons, you can always challenge the action taken by the officer of blocking your ITC. And for this, we have a very important, there are many judgments in the Income Tax Act. You can refer section 148, because that deals with reassessment in Income Tax Act, and over there also the condition of reasons to believe is there. Next issue. Very interesting. Sir, I'll just complete and then we can take question answers, please. Now, the fourth issue is time limit. Now, the law has provided under section 16(4), that there is some time limit to avail ITC. And like what we were discussing, and definitely you all would have faced this, that if you miss that timeline, you cannot avail credit. Now, I have not taken the section verbatim because we know what the timeline is. It is next year's September returns due date, or filing of annual return, whichever is earlier. Now, if this is the challenge, how you can handle this? Firstly, but I'll first say, as far as possible, let us try to avoid litigation, means try to comply with the law. Which law? Not the law, what it is, law which the officer accepts. So this is not correct. But see, I'm speaking from the standing in the shoes of a practitioner and not having very big clients who can all afford litigation. So simple. Let us first try to follow that law which is acceptable to the officer to the extent possible. Where not possible and it is totally going against us, then you have these things to your recourse. Now, first is section 16(4), which provides for the time limit, again is having small flaw. What is that flaw? The conditions which we studied in my earlier slide are given in section 16(1), 16(2). And section 16(2), which gives the conditions, starts with non-obstantive clause, that is notwithstanding anything contained in this section. Means section 16(2) supersedes the entire section 16, and 16(4) is part of section 16. So indirectly, section 16(2) is above 16(4). Now go back to my earlier slides where I was explaining constitutional right point. What all the cases says that if you have complied with all the conditions required by law to avail ITC and you have validly availed ITC, nobody can stop you from claiming that ITC and it will become your right. Now, what are those conditions? The conditions are given in section 16(2), and 16(2) overrides 16(4). So even if I don't comply with 16(4), I'm still fine because 16(2) is overriding 16(4). So this is the biggest difference if you have to fight the matter of that you have missed claiming, like sir was saying in the example, that ultimately they forgot to take the ITC and the time limit passed. No problem. If the amount is used, claim it in the current 3B. Inform the officer by putting a letter. This is also important. If you are doing something like this by yourself, inform the officer so that you are not tomorrow proved to be of guilty mind. Because you have done that, you inform the officer, definitely he'll come with notice. Then you have all these things to your counter. But yes, be prepared for further litigation. Second, interestingly, section 16(1), which gives the conditions, 16(1), 16(2), and also the definition of input tax credit, everywhere they use the word take. Now, what is take? Even 16(4), which is about time limit, uses the word take. Now, there is a big dispute going on. What is take? Now, please accept and understand this point. Putting something in 3B is not taking, it is availing. There is a difference between taking credit and availing credit. Taking is the first step. And taking, if you go to the record rules, over there it means taking in your books. So the stand that we always take, or the defense that we have, is that when the law is saying, okay, chalo, I accept your time limit section also, 16(4) for the time being. Still, I have a defense. It says that you can take credit up to this time limit. And already I have taken because the credit is appearing in my books. What I did not do, or what I could not do, was I could not show it in my returns, which is the second step, which is availing. Even section 16(4), which puts the time limit, uses the word, you have to take that ITC within this timeline, not avail. In another question is still pending, whether 3B is a return as per 39, because again, the section uses you have to take it in the return of September. But if 3B is not a return, if that is accepted by the Honorable Supreme Court, then fine. We will still come out with this point, but this is pending. So I've put a question mark. Most important, you have a legacy case law to your favor. It is of the GST regime, where a similar matter was in our favor decided, where Senvat credit was claimed in books but not disclosed in their ST3 returns. Still, they were treated as eligible. So these are the defenses if you are handling 16(4) issue. Now, the officer may come to you with a counter challenge. Sir, I have a counter case law to you. Now, there are two counter case laws. In Maharashtra, we had a VAT decision in Mahalakshmi Cotton. And there is a decision of ALD Automotive of Karnataka, where in both these cases, now why I am taking this decision, because we are addressing Bangalore conference. For Maharashtra, it is the Mahalakshmi Cotton case, and for Karnataka, it is the ALD Automotive case, where they denied VAT credit because of not honoring the timeline. But I would like to humbly submit to the officer that, sir, your case law is not valid in GST, because in your Tamil Nadu VAT, the condition was that you should have taken by this timeline, no problem. We also have that condition. But the difference between your Tamil Nadu VAT and my GST law is, in my GST law, conditions are in 16(2) and 16(4) is timeline, and 16(4) is subservient to 16(2). So I am only guided or bound by 16(2). In Tamil Nadu VAT, if you go to the conditions, all are put at one place. So the difference is, in Tamil Nadu VAT, the condition of timeline is in the main section. So you cannot override it. You have to even satisfy it to become eligible. So even if he claims this as his defense, you have a counter, sir, it is not applicable to GST law, because GST law 16(2) is the main condition section, 16(4) is subservient. So these are the pointers which can be of your defense. Now, some more issue relating to procedural compliances. I will take it up to quarter to 2, which is the time assigned. If something is left out, everything is there in your notes. You can just go through them. And I would like to take few question and answers after that so that we can cover all things. Now, some issues relating to section 16. Now, section 16(1) requires that you should be a registered person in order to be eligible for ITC. Agreed, 100% agreed. But I have a doubt. Now, see, these are all questions that you are going to face in future. What you are facing presently, I have already covered. Now, these can come up in future. The law requires that you should be registered to be entitled to ITC. We all know 16(1). My question is, as a recipient, at what point of time you should be registered to be eligible? One, that is when you have received the goods from your supplier, or when the supplier is raising invoice, or when the supplier is filing the returns, or you are filing the returns. At what point of time you should be registered? I hope you are understanding what I'm trying to say, because all these things may happen at different point of time. The answer to this is, there is something in GST called as effective date of registration. Repeat my words, effective date of registration. So whenever you are applying for registration, you have to apply it within 30 days timeline. And if you apply it within 30 days timeline, even though you receive the registration late, but the effective date is the date on which you became liable. Whereas if you apply for registration late, the effective date is the date when you are allotted the registration. We all know this particular provision. This particular provision is giving the hint as to at what point of time you should be registered. My personal understanding I'm sharing that this particular section gives you the effective date of registration, and before the supplier files his return, your effective date of registration should be in place. This is my personal understanding. Law will decide in future as to what is the right interpretation. Second, condition is that in order to be eligible for ITC, your goods or services should be used or intended to be used for the purpose or in the course of business. Now the question is whether the condition requires that the goods should be used in your business premises. It only says it should be used or intended to be used in the course or furtherance of business. It has not mentioned about the place. If you go to the erstwhile excise rule, if you read the definition over there of input and capital goods, it has very specifically mentioned in the factory, in the premises of service provider. Such a point is missing. Now, in this regard, my personal opinion is that it can be used anywhere. The restriction of using it in your own business premises is not there. And where this is useful nowadays, in today's time of COVID, and now this work from home will become, I believe, will be a parallel culture. In such cases, many companies are giving laptops and so many things to the employees to be used at their place. Whether companies would be eligible for ITC, my humble opinion is yes, because nowhere in the law the condition is it should be used in premises of your business. Next, whether one-to-one correlation is required, there is no such requirement, neither in the previous law, we have the landmark decision of Daiichi Kakaria, nor in the GST law. Next question, when are you eligible for ITC? One, when you have actually used it, or one when you have put to use, or one when you have purchased. What is your answer? Used, put to use, or even if you have purchased and kept it, yet to be even installed? Answer is, moment you purchase it. There is no condition. Why? Because the law has required that it should be used or it should be intended for use. The moment you purchase it is intended for use, you are eligible to claim ITC. You need not wait for its installation. Next, this I have already addressed. Nowadays, different gadgets are provided at the employee's residence. Now you will be eligible for ITC. Next, very important point. Issues that may arise out of this phrase. The law requires when are you eligible for ITC? When you are using the material or the services in the course or furtherance of business. So the condition is you should have used the input service in the course or furtherance of business. Now, what is in the course or furtherance of business is yet to be decided in the GST law. Now, the most important point is we understand what is in the course of business because it is something which can be directly assessed. But what is in the furtherance of business is yet to be assessed because it is a new terminology. This is a very landmark decision of Coca-Cola company. I'm sure you all would be knowing the business format of Coca-Cola company. The Coca-Cola company itself does not manufacture cold drinks. I hope everybody knows this. It only manufactures the concentrates. And it gives the concentrates to the bottling units, and the bottling units prepare the cold drink and sell it. Now, interestingly, the product of Coca-Cola company, Pepsi company is the concentrate and not the final cold drink. But we see so many ads. We see so many events being sponsored by Coca-Cola. We have so many these IPLs and so many teams being sponsored by Coca-Cola. So they are spending lakhs of crore rupees on advertisement and sponsorship. Now, the question that came up in this particular issue was that your product is concentrate and you are advertising for cold drinks. How can you claim the input tax rate over their SENVAT credit? Even in the previous SENVAT credit rules, which were very strict as compared to GST, it was allowed in favor, considering the same point that the advertisement meant for promoting sale of beverages was ultimately benefiting your sale of concentrates. This, I think, can give us an idea what could be the meaning of the term in furtherance of. So, in the course of business means directly related to your business. In furtherance can go beyond that. You may be doing something which may not be directly benefiting your business. You have parallel decisions even in income tax on this. Still, it will be eligible. So I think this case law you can use whenever you are answering many questions of in furtherance. Like, what are these questions? Whether normal loss is eligible. You have the previous decision. Now we have recent decision also. So it is eligible. But what about abnormal loss? Many times it happens that some abnormal loss has happened. I believe it should be eligible. This is my personal view. Now, yes, I understand 17.5H. You will say, sir, it blocks. But again, there is a dispute on 17.5H. What it blocks is, let us say I purchase raw material and raw material ITC I have claimed, which is lost. Okay, you may have to reverse it. But what if your final goods are lost? My personal humble view is, if your final goods are lost, you are still eligible for ITC of input. 17.5H will not block it. This is my personal view. Next, very interesting point. Gold coins are distributed to your employees or they are given to your suppliers or customers. We say that 17.5H blocks it because we have given it free. Here I have one simple submission. Why am I giving them gold coins? Maybe to motivate my employees. And always, I will not give it to everyone. I'll give it only to selected ones who have achieved some targets. Similarly to my suppliers, I'll do it because they have, like you have many times you have scheme. If you achieve this target, you are given a bullet. If you achieve this target, you have a foreign trip. If I'm spending on such targets, even though I'm giving it free, a bullet, I'm gifting it to my supplier. My humble opinion is, I will apply the Coca-Cola India case and say that this is in the furtherance of my business and it is not hit by section 17.5H. Also because I'm not giving it free. I have given some target, and if he has achieved the target and then I'm giving it, it does not even fits in the terminology of gift. See, gift is something which is out of your personal wish, love and affection. But when it is target based, when it is some achievement based, how it can be gift? My humble submission is, where you are giving a target either to your suppliers or you have selected some employees on the basis of performance and you are giving them something, you should not be denied ITC on that, and it matches with the furtherance concept. Next important issue, CSR. I think this will be the last part. Last 1 or 2 slides you can go through yourself. In fact, this CSR slide is not there, so I took it first. The remaining slides are there in your printed notes. Now, many companies who are fitting in the CSR requirement are spending crores of rupees on CSR, and specifically during this COVID times, the CSR was in the form of giving sanitizers, giving hand gloves and all these things either to employees or to outsiders. This was the common thing which many companies did as their CSR, and the GST law, many AR says that this is disallowed. My personal humble view is CSR is allowed. Reason 1, if something is obligated under any law, like this is obligated under the company's law, how can it be said to be gift? Again, I'm addressing 17.5H because they are blocking it under 17.5H, saying that it is a gift. It is not a gift. Why it is not a gift? Because when I'm giving it to someone as CSR, it is not out of my personal wish. So it can never be called as gift. Second submission, the same point. It is for the furtherance of my business. In fact, it is other way around. If I don't spend this, tomorrow company law will cancel my registration and I may have to face penal consequences. So to ensure furtherance of my business, I'm incurring this. So second reason. Third reason, now we have some pre-GST decisions. Again, what is very important in pre-GST decision is, if you compare the GST definition of input service with the CENVAT definitions. CENVAT definitions were very strict. In fact, in CENVAT, there was a requirement that your input should be used in manufacture. There is no such requirement. Here the requirement, it should be used in course or furtherance. So here the scope has been expanded. That is why if something is allowed in the previous law, it will 100% be allowed in the current law, and CSR was allowed. There are two important decisions relating to this. If my earlier law, which was much stricter in terms of ITC eligibility, allows CENVAT credit of CSR expenses, 100% GST law should allow. Now, my last submission. So this is something out of the box. 17.5H blocks ITC on goods which are lost, destroyed, distributed as free samples or gift, correct? It is not blocking ITC on input services. It is blocking only on goods, correct? Now my simple question, which is part of my other slides, which you can go through that. What is goods? What is service? How it is decided? This is, I'm connecting to my next slide also. What is goods? What is services? How it is decided? I'll give you a few examples. I purchase an asset. I engage you for installation. So what you are providing me is goods or service? I want your answers. What you are providing me is goods or service? Service. You will give me invoice with SAC code, correct? Agreed. When I'm recording this installation expenses in my book, in which account head I will record it? Asset. I will capitalize it. No? Now, I'm having expense invoice, huh? But in my books, where it is appearing? Capital. Now tell me, when you are taking ITC of this expense, what rules you will apply to this ITC? ITC of expense or ITC of goods? Because in your books, it has taken the character of capital asset. Are you agreeing to my point? So I received SAC invoice because you supplied installation service, but I capitalize in my books. First example. Reverse example. You supplied goods to me. What are these goods for? These goods are in the form of uniforms. These goods are in the form of safety equipments, which I'm going to use for my employees. How do I book it in my P&L? Which account head? Labor welfare. Now tell me one thing. What is the actual character of labor welfare? Is it goods or is it service? It is more like a service. Are you getting what I'm trying to focus? This is something very out of the box. This is just a random thought in my mind. I'm still cooking this thought, but I thought I would share with the learned people with me that when we say that ITC under section 17.5H is blocked, I agree, okay. For the time being, I agree everything, what you are saying. But my question is, it is blocking only on goods. But when I'm recording or booking these in my accounts, I can book it as expense. Then what? Will it still have the character of goods? I gave you two examples where what you gave me was expense or service, but in my books, it took the color of goods. Other way around, what you gave me was goods, but in my books, it took the color of service or expense. So my question, you can cook on this and you can please share your replies with me, your understanding. Can we say that CSR expenses are not in the nature of inputs or that is goods, but they are in the nature of input services? Because if this can be concluded, then there is no challenge. 17.5H, you are already out because 17.5H only applies to goods. But this is something very out of the box. I hope this is clear to all. Fine. So that's it from my side, sir. I have completed my presentation in time. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. And I'm sure I was able to add a lot of value to you. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Online, we have one question, which I think in his presentation, the audience still have the doubt. Whether ITC of GST paid on purchase of flat can be set off. We are also not very clear about the question, but that's what it is asked. Whether ITC of GST paid on purchase of flat can be set off.
First, if it is for personal use, 100% is not set offable. If it is for commercial use, I personally opine that it is set offable. I'm going by the Honorable Orissa High Court's judgment. I hope you all know that judgment, where it has said that even GST paid on construction of immovable property, which is used for giving it on rent, is eligible. Can anybody name the case? Yes, Safari Retreats, and it is pending with Supreme Court.
And one more is, in which month am I able to avail and utilize the ITC?
Is it relating to RCM? Because otherwise, avail and ITC utilizes in the same month. Only for RCM, you can avail it. In fact, you can also utilize it, but again, there is slight challenge, but yes, even for RCM, ITC, you can avail and utilize in the same month. Only it cannot be utilized for setting off the RCM liability. It has to be set off against your other output liability, but it can be done in the same month.
That's it with the online questions. If any offline questions are
Yes,
there,
sir,
we are
please.
ready to take
Hi,
them.
Vishal. This is Sheshu. So regarding section 2C, it talks about making the payment to the exchequer as one of the condition to take that. So when we are having a ready-made facility on the website portal where we can just put the GST number of the supplier, we will now has not filed his 3B. So will it not be the straight evidence that he didn't make the payment to the exchequer, so that we cannot prove tomorrow that the responsibility of the department cannot be rubbed on our shoulder, so that under that I can take a shelter?
Sir, I agree to this point 100%. But firstly, since when is this facility available? It wasn't available on 1st of July, 2017. First, let us say, chalo, let us keep that also aside. It is available today. Now, what is the position today? So let us say supplier has not paid, but how much am I responsible means to what extent I can control it. Can I control supplier paying the tax first? Second thing, let us say I go to those cases where the online it is showing the supplier has paid tax. But can I go and check whether he has availed admissible credit, and against utilizing that credit, whatever tax he has paid is admissible? Because tomorrow, if it is found that he has done some fake invoices, he has taken some fake ITC, then the department will come to you saying that since he has taken fake ITC and utilized for paying your tax is also disallowed. This is also what department is doing. So my point is, yes, this is one, you can say negative for us, because I can go and check on the portal that whether supplier has paid or not. But can that only one thing is going against me? First point. Second, and if I can see, even before me, the department officials can see, and they have the law and the machinery both to recover. So my question is, I am ready to reverse, but my request is at least you first take action against supplier. There should be some timeline given that, okay, up to this date or for next 6 months, if the supplier is not responding or if the department is not able to collect, then I may be held responsible for reversing. I will at least agree this.
My second question is about overriding effect of 16.2
Two.
or
16.4.
16.4. So will it really get that color of overriding effect? Do you see that? Because when I see section 16.2 starts with notwithstanding anything contained in section 16,
Correct.
registered person can take the credit unless he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Correct.
Right? So it is a thing where I follow all the other sections like 16.1, 16.3, 16.4. But still, if I fail under section 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm not eligible to take credit. If that way, if you say section 2 cannot override 4, to my view.
Sir, that is one of the positions. I agree, but I have a different stance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Few more poured in here.
1 second.
Yes.
So I'll just take one or two from this, sir. In which month I am able to avail and utilize the ITC on invoices where the supplier is filing the return quarterly, whether in the month of receipt of invoice or after filing of return by the supplier?
Fine. Ma'am, now there is something called as IFF, that facility. If the supplier is a quarterly supplier, but still if he is using the IFF facility, it will appear in my 2A, 2B immediately. So I can utilize it. Obviously, it has to appear in my 2A, 2B, and the supplier should be using that IFF facility. So then I can utilize it in the same month.
Then one more. Can we claim ITC on construction of building which we have given on lease?
Same Safari Retreat case. So
Okay.
my humble submission is you take the ITC. Now, yes, somebody had a question about can I pay or reverse under protest? There is no written provision, but similarly, there was no written provision even under the earlier erstwhile excise law, but it was accepted, and there is a decision of India Cement, something 1989. So if there was no written law, in the earlier erstwhile excise regime and still it was accepted over there to pay under protest, the same thing I will apply over here. So I will avail the credit. One option is I will not utilize and now there is no interest on non-utilization. So that is one to my benefit, or I will avail and I will reverse it under protest. And I will send a letter to the officer saying that I have availed and reversed under protest. So till this particular safari retreat decision finds some position, please allow me to re-avail it. These are the two possible answers. But if you ask me, I'm of that opinion that if the property is going to be used for commercial purposes, you should be allowed, even though 17.5 is not allowing it.
Okay, one last one. If a hospital's pharmacy provides medicine free of cost to poor patients and invoices at zero, the patients being outpatients, then is the ITC on medicine has to be reversed.
But my first question is, why will any pharmacy do this? So, but still, if it is only a academic question, if you go strictly by 17.5H, right? If you are selling it for zero, there will be no eligibility of ITC then. But practically, I don't think this will happen. This is only an academic question. Yeah, sir, you had some question.
Now, the dealer has not filed the return of income during 2018,
Okay.
one of the month. Subsequently, he found out after 8 months or 10 months or 1 year down the line, he found that the return has not been filed.
The recipient found out.
The dealer,
Means the recipient.
a
That the
recipient,
supplier did not file returns.
supplier did.
Okay.
And supplier also not filed. Now, from the point of supplier, I'm asking from the point of supplier, he wants to file a return, not under the regular return because the time is lapsed, 16.4 time lapsed.
No, sir, 1 second. 16.4 is not barring the supplier.
So,
Supplier can anytime pay the tax. It will be
Pay the
barring the
tax.
recipient. But go ahead,
when
sir.
the paying tax, he has to file in a regular returns because the regular return due dates have been completed.
Right.
He is going to go for in DRC 3.
Okay.
Suppose if the dealer filing in a DRC 3, is he eligible to claim input tax credit
Of
of purchases, whatever he has done?
what he made in that particular
Yeah,
period.
that particular month.
Fine. Sir, I personally believe I'm not very much using the portal because I'm more into research and litigation, but maybe members can help me. If I have not filed a return, let us say of April 2018, means my GSTR 1 is pending, 3B is pending. I understand portal will not block me from filing the returns GSTR 1 or 3B even today. Yes, members can answer. Portal is not blocking me, sir. So I can always file the return of April 2018 today. In fact, I can even file the return of July 2017 today if I have not filed it at that time. Correct? I'm correct? You have to answer, you have to help me because I'm not using the portal much. But whatever I understand the portal, it is allowing me to file my returns. Now comes the second question. So your supplier can file return or not? I think yes. Why to go for DRC 03? Second question, can he avail the ITC of April this month? Yes. If you are going by 16.4, you cannot. But my view is you avail, you give them a letter that, sir, we are doing this because we believe this is the case. Definitely you will get a notice, but you should be ready for litigation. But I will personally say that why you should go for DRC 03, you file your returns. Because for non-filing return, you are continuing with the late fees. Better is you file the returns. If your question is, sir, we have filed the returns, but we forgot to report in those returns, then what is the position? I will say, sir, still in that case, don't use DRC 03, you file it in current month. Now I want again help of members because you all are using the portal more. Let us say I have invoice of April 2018, which I forgot to report in GSTR 1 of 18, which is filed. My question I'm asking you, can I file that April 2018 invoice in the current GSTR 1? Will it accept? It will not accept. Okay, so the challenge is exactly. Correct. So it will not take in GSTR 1, but luckily in 3B you can always show extra liability and there will be no notice. See, today you are getting notices if GSTR 1 is higher and 3B is lower. Here in your case, 1 will be lower because you cannot upload the invoice, but 3B will be higher. So you show that liability in 3B. Don't use DRC 03, sir. Show it in 3B. I believe that is a much better approach. Take ITC also in 3B. Obviously, both has challenge, especially 16.4 will be blocking the ITC, but you claim it if you want to go in for litigation. And put a letter to your nodal officer that we forgot this, so we are doing this. This is my submission on this. Right, sir? Fine.
So,
One from the online. Notwithstanding the legal predicament going on between 16.2 and 16.4, during the GST audit, it is found that there is a RCM liability in respect of purchase from unregistered supplier and it is paid. Now can I take credit or 16.4 can come as defense to the department?
Here, my understanding is there are two answers. One, now we are talking about RCM liability, so you are the recipient. Now I have to check whether my supplier is registered or unregistered. If my supplier is registered, has he given me invoice? Let us say we are talking about 1819. If he has given me a proper GST invoice of 1819, marking that on this invoice tax is payable under RCM, and I forgot to pay RCM in that particular 1819, and today during audit I identify that invoice and I am paying the RCM liability, my submission is GST ITC will not be allowed on this particular RCM paid. My submission. Second answer, if your supplier is unregistered, that is he has not given you any GST invoice, in such case the law says you have to make self invoice. Now if you read the rule, the analogy that comes out is that when will you make this RCM invoice? Can anybody tell me? You have to make this RCM self invoice. It is pertaining to 1819. When will you make this? You will make it today. Which date will you put and what would be the invoice sequence? Will you put the invoice sequence of 1819? Are you legally allowed to use the invoice sequence of 1819 today? I believe no. The law does not allow me to do that. 1819 is closed. Books are closed. Audit done. 9/9C done. If I identify something missed out of 1819, my inputs on which RCM is applicable, supplier did not give me any GST invoice, I have to raise self invoice. My understanding, and what not only understanding, this is what we are following. I will prepare a self invoice of today's date with today's invoice number. And I will pay RCM and I will take credit in this month's 3B. And according to my understanding of the law, this is what we are following. And according to my understanding of law, this is acceptable. So I have two answers depending upon whether your supplier has given you a proper GST invoice because he was registered or he has not given you. This is my understanding and answer. Fine, ma'am?
Last one question. Last one question, sir.
Sir, taking the backing of this Gujarat High Court verdict, what you have given.
Sorry, I cannot see. Acha, sorry.
Yeah. I've legally availed credit. I've gone in for refund.
Which Gujarat ruling, sir?
Gujarat 86A, rule 86A, you have given one how to counter department
yes.
under that heading. For some vague reason, certain portion of GST part which we have claimed refund, they have rejected it, disallowed it.
Okay.
Can I take the backing of this and further push them?
Sir, firstly, 86A and refund has no connection.
I
Correct.
know.
So it is an
Yeah.
independent question. Fine. So your refund is denied. Now what you want to use? I'm not getting.
His observations clearly in refund sanction order.
Okay.
Yes, just given a vague.
They will only say that your refund is rejected.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And when asked, he told certain purchases what he have declared, it's not reflecting in GST.
Wait.
We asked him to list out, he was not ready to do it. It's a vague reply. He refused to give it in
Sir,
writing
actually,
also.
it is not a vague reply. They are testing your skill of reading between the lines. They say that we have written, you have to read between the lines. So, sir, that's what I'm saying. It is a very, very litigative issue. And in fact, we have made representation to the council and we are expecting that they come out with some circular clarifying it. There is a circular, but it is again going against us. I believe, again, my personal view, considering all the discussion, if your ITC was eligible ITC and it is not appearing in 2A, firstly, you can take ITC, yes. If you can take ITC, sir, you can also take refund. This is my personal submission on this. Yes. Yes, sir.
RCM. So regarding RCM, I have a bill from the advocate for the input of the transaction. But as per law, again, I have to raise a bill on myself. I mean, how, I mean,
Yeah.
and again count it. I mean,
Sir.
can it be refused? Can the credit be refused? Even though I have paid it on RCM, just because I have not raised a self-invoice.
Acha, so now your question is not about time limit. It is about I failed to raise self-invoice.
Yes, I failed to raise self-invoice. Can it be a basis for refusing the credit?
Technically, yes, because 16(2)(a) condition is you should have valid documents, and one of the valid document is your self-invoice.
Going for the,
Fine, sir. Okay. So, sorry, sir. Sir, I'm saying I'm of the view that it is the time limit of 16(4) is not applicable. So you should be eligible to claim. But sir, it is very litigative. Again, I started my session with this only. It is a call that we have to take that whether we want to go in for litigation. My first humble advice will be, so far as possible, don't take these stances. Make some calculations before 20th of October and try to find out everything and show it in your returns. My first So still, sir, as per the law, if you are going verbally, verbatim law, and the officers understanding and the position, they will not allow you, sir. But litigative part, our view as consultants and what we are taking, if the amount is huge and the client is ready for litigation, you should go and fight it out.
Thank you so much, sir.
It
Ladies
was
and
really a
gentlemen,
great session and great value addition for me. Thank you. Thank you.
a huge round of applause for CA Vishal Poddar. I request CA Panindra Gupta PR, Treasurer, Bangalore branch, to present a memento as our token of appreciation and gratitude. Thank you, sir, for taking us through all the practical issues in terms of input tax credit. Thank you for your patience and time today. Thank you so much. We now break for lunch and we resume at 2:30.